fight for the unborn. President Trump takes to social media blasting recent pro-abortion proposals by Democrats. We're at the White House. And pro-life supporters rallied to condemn a proposal in Virginia that would have allowed abortion until the moment of birth. Religious freedom. The Trump administration grants a waiver for a Protestant foster agency to work only with couples who adhere to their beliefs. We talk with their president and CEO. And worrying signs for our society. My thoughts on the push to legalize late-term abortion on EWTN News Nightly for Thursday, January 31st, 2019. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you to those of you joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. President Trump denounces a bill in Virginia that would have made abortion legal up until the moment a woman is giving birth. As outrage over the measure spreads across the country, he tells the Daily Caller he thinks Delegate Kathy Tran's proposal is terrible and reaffirmed his rejection of late-term abortion. We have team coverage tonight, including White House correspondent Mark Irons with more on the president's comments and his pro-life policies. But we start with Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi, who talked to a pro-life lawmaker in Virginia who helped defeat that bill. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Lauren. A subcommittee in the Virginia House of Delegates defeated that bill. It would have made it easier to have a late-term abortion, even up to birth. Pro-life Americans condemned this bill as barbaric after this video went viral.
Virginia Delegate Kathy Tran pitched her bill that shocked many Americans earlier this week.
A woman is about to give birth. She has physical signs that she is about to give a birth. Would that still be a point at which she could request an abortion if she was so certified? She's dilating.
Mr. Chairman, that would be a decision that the doctor, the physician, and the woman would make.
I understand that. I'm asking
point.
if your bill allows that.
My bill would allow that, yes.
Virginia House Majority Leader Todd Gilbert is heard questioning the Democrat.
She's a mother of four. To put it in the starkest possible terms for her and make her own up to what her bill actually did even may have been unsettling for her.
And unsettling for President Trump. He tells the Daily Caller he thought it was terrible, and then brought up this line from the 2016 debates.
If you go with what Hillary is saying, in the 9th month, you can take the baby and rip the baby out of the womb of the mother just prior to the birth of the baby.
Amid outrage, Tran is defending herself.
What I have done is try to make sure that women are able to make these decisions and access these services in a timely manner.
Governor Ralph Northam of Virginia is also facing backlash after his support for the bill.
The infant would be delivered. The infant would be kept comfortable. The infant would be resuscitated if that's what the mother and the family desired. And then a discussion would ensue between the physicians and the mothers.
We found out that our governor is willing basically to embrace the notion that if a child is born alive, you actually just keep the child comfortable while you discuss how or whether to allow it to die.
Arlington Bishop Michael Burbidge says the governor's attitude and this bill reflect a level of animosity against the inherent goodness of every child. This Saturday, pro-life activists will be rallying in the home district of Delegate Tran. Lauren?
Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi. Thank you, Jason. And this is not the first time President Trump has used his megaphone to support the pro-life cause. Now, advocates for the unborn hope he'll take it a step further. White House correspondent Mark Irons reports. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Lauren. More than a dozen pro-lifers sent this letter to President Trump last week asking him to take executive action. They want him to defund Planned Parenthood, the nation's largest abortion provider. The president's message today is clearly against abortion. President Trump tweets, Democrats are becoming the party of late-term abortion, high taxes, open borders, and crime. The president blasts Democrats after they legalized late-term abortion in New York and seek to expand the late-term law in Virginia.
What his tweets do is just offer encouragement and support for the pro-lifers to keep fighting even harder than they already are.
Carol Tobias with National Right to Life says that support is key. Since the beginning of his campaign, the president supported the 20-week abortion ban, opposed Planned Parenthood, and backed the March for Life. He calls himself a pro-life president.
When I ran for office, I pledged to stand for life. And as president, that's exactly what I've done.
I am all in favor of gloves off.
Vanessa Santos is the director of media relations at Javelin, a PR firm that represents pro-life clients near Washington, D.C. She believes President Trump and pro-life advocates can use social media to maximize their message.
We certainly don't want to turn off people, but we also don't want to hide the truth.
Tobias says social media has helped level the playing field.
So the other side, our opponents, can put their arguments out there, but so can we, and we can win when we have that opportunity.
President Trump is not the only one speaking out against abortion today. Vice President Mike Pence wrote an op-ed today calling late-term abortions morally reprehensible and evil. And presidential counselor Kellyanne Conway sent a tweet saying abortion moments before a baby is born is not a winning issue, it's murder. Lauren?
White House correspondent Mark Irons. Thank you, Mark. I'll have my commentary later in the show. The White House press secretary says President Trump's victory in the 2016 election was the product of divine will.
I think God calls all of us to fill different roles at different times, and I think that he wanted Donald Trump to become president, and that's why he's there. And I think he has done a tremendous job in supporting a lot of the things that people of faith really care about.
Sanders also says it's ridiculous for House Speaker Nancy Pelosi to call a border wall immoral. She says it's hard to listen to ideas on morality from Democrats. But the House Speaker isn't backing down. Today, Pelosi says there will be no money for a border wall in any deal to keep the government open past February 15th. The California Democrat says she wants to see a bipartisan bill by next Friday. Earlier, President Trump took to Twitter to say Republicans are, quote, wasting their time trying to negotiate with Democrats. A new report from the United Nations says more than 30,000 Nigerians have fled their country in the last week. They're on the run from Boko Haram, a terror group known for targeting Christians in Africa. UN officials say the mass exodus in Nigeria is making a bad situation worse. Correspondent Wyatt Goolsbee reports from the State Department. Good evening, Wyatt.
Good evening, Lauren. State Department officials condemn Boko Haram for carrying out terror attacks in Nigeria, as well as neighboring Chad and Cameroon. The UN says violence is on the rise in the region and forcing aid workers to pull out of some areas. Attacks targeting men, women, and children in Nigeria are forcing thousands to run for their lives every day. Boko Haram extremists have waged a decade-long war, burning villages, mosques, and churches in the north. But the UN Refugee Agency says this month they've become more violent.
There's increased attacks in Nigeria, which have meant new arrivals in Cameroon, but we've actually seen increased activity in Cameroon itself.
Soldiers in neighboring Cameroon remain on the alert. They can't stop the flow of Nigerian refugees flooding in.
What was it that they had done?
Earlier this month, the Christian advocacy group Open Doors USA ranked the West African country as number 12 on their list of nations where Christians face the most persecution for their faith. Daniel Dogo, an evangelical pastor, says his church is under threat. He described to me what the terrorists say to Christians when they come to their homes in the middle of the night.
So now we have come. It's either you relinquish your faith as a Christian or we kill you. And as many who refuse to relinquish their faith, they were gunned down.
Boko Haram has also kidnapped schoolgirls, some of whom have been rescued. Others remain missing. Dogo tells me it's his faith in God that keeps him going.
It was that dependence that gave me the ability to stand amidst the storm and to be able to remain and stand so strong for the persecuted church.
The population of Nigeria is half Christian and half Muslim. Most Christians live in the south and most Muslims live in the north. The UN estimates it needs more than $800 million to provide food and supplies to help stem the crisis. Lauren?
Correspondent Wyatt Goolsbee reporting from the State Department. Thank you, Wyatt. Thousands of people have been fleeing the Islamic State's last major stronghold in Syria in recent days. The Syrian Democratic Forces, backed by the U.S., have intensified their offensive against the extremists. They say thousands of civilians are fleeing every day to reach safe zones, and officials say some members of ISIS are leaving with the civilians. In Venezuela, a Catholic cardinal wants President Nicolas Maduro to step down. Cardinal Jorge Orozo says it would be a step toward the Pope's plea for peace in the country. Also today, opposition leader Juan Guaido received the backing of the European Parliament, which could lead to recognition from the EU. Lisbon, Portugal, will host the next World Youth Day in 2022. The announcement was made on the Pope's final day in Panama during the closing Mass for World Youth Day. An estimated 700,000 people attended, including presidents from across Central America. Benjamin Crockett, EWTN's Vatican digital strategist, was also there. He joins us from Rome. Benjamin, you spent 10 days in Panama. You camped out the night before the closing Mass. What was that experience like for you?
So I, along with 700,000 other pilgrims, spent the night at the St. John Paul II Field. For me, it was the most extraordinary and transformative experience of the entire World Youth Day journey. I felt that vigil that started in the evening and then the closing Mass that next morning was kind of a micro pilgrimage, if you will. It encapsulated all of the themes of World Youth Day. And so what began with song and dance and celebration, Pope Francis then led us in a Eucharistic adoration. There was the joyful recitation of the mysteries of the Rosary, and then a statue of Our Lady of Fatima in procession. And so the spiritual energies of the entire crowd, the entire community there, you could feel it become more and more focused as the night continued. And then that morning with the closing Mass, you could feel 700,000 faithful ready to go back to all their different homelands around the world to proclaim the gospel.
Let's talk
so
about
it was,
that. Let's
filled
talk
with so
about
much
that, Benjamin.
excitement and joy.
Sure. According to the Vatican, young people from 155 countries as far away as Asia and the Middle East were there. Tell us about your experiences with the Pakistani group.
Yes, so I met a group of 14 from a delegation from Islamabad, Pakistan. So I spoke with Nabil, who is there, the leader of that group, and they initially were not allowed to leave Pakistan to come to Panama for World Youth Day because on their passports it says that they're Christian. And so the authorities said, you may not go to celebrate this religious event. Then Nabil and his fellow members of the pilgrimage group said, well, we're going to make a social media video. We're going to try to create a campaign around this because it's absolutely not right that we can't go. The authorities were then very nervous of this uproar, and so they were allowed to go. But when I spoke to Nabil, he was so shocked by religious Christians from around the world coming to Panama who are able to celebrate their faith openly. And he said, how is it that that we who cannot celebrate our faith openly, we do so much? And so he stressed, to please don't take your faith for granted and to pray for all of them in Pakistan.
And before we go, we don't have much time, but you said that you met a group who took a boat and had maybe some berets? I don't know.
Yes, I met a group of French pilgrims who left from Brest, which is the point of the French in Brittany, and they spent 5.5 months by boat to come to Panama. So they said, I spoke with Aurelia and Mathilde, who were in charge of that delegation, and they said that that act of physical pilgrimage was enormously transformative on them to be able to live on a boat with all the fellow Catholics to get to know each other.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for sharing your journey with us, Benjamin Crockett, EWTN Vatican Bureau Digital Strategist.
Thank you, Lauren, for having me.
Coming up, a pro-life senator weighs in on the recent number of proposals for late-term abortions. Welcome back to News Nightly. While the push for pro-abortion legislation ramps up across the country, some senators are fighting for the unborn, joining forces with the leader of the first pro-life caucus in U.S. Senate history. Joining me now is Senator Steve Daines, Republican from Montana, founder of the Senate's new pro-life caucus and a member of both the Senate Finance and Appropriations Committees. Senator Daines, welcome to our broadcast.
Glad to be here.
I want to get your take on pro-abortion legislation that's receiving a lot of coverage in the last week. Governor Cuomo signed into law the New York Reproductive Health Act, permits abortion until birth. And earlier this week, we saw a proposal before the Virginia legislature that would have allowed the same thing. We've reported the governor of that state, Democrat Ralph Northam, has taken a lot of heat for seeming to defend that bill. So are you concerned that laws that would be enacted at the state level, like the one in New York or the one proposed in Virginia, are setting a dangerous precedent?
Oh, my word. I can't think of the right word to use when you saw these horrible things that are being signed into law and said by people who are elected in this country. I think of the words evil. I think of the words chilling. And this brings it all back home. We just had our first grandchild was born last week. Emma Ray Daines, she came 10 days early, but she's healthy, thriving, doing wonderful. And you look at that little baby, little Emma Ray, and if you're in the state of New York, Emma Ray's life is in danger. I'll tell you what, I think there's some optimism we can have though in what's going on, because you see this incredible evil overreach from these states and from these political leaders that now paints a picture of truly what their agenda is, of abortion that's unrestricted any moment in the period. In fact, even a baby that's born alive, as we saw here, would be in danger.
I know, it does send chills up your spine. And congratulations on Emma Ray.
Thank you.
That's fabulous,
Thank you.
your first grandchild. But as the leader of the Senate's pro-life caucus, in light of all of this, what is your first item on your to-do list?
Well, we're having that conversation as we speak. And as we see the horrible news coming out of New York, out of Virginia, you see really where the far left agenda is moving in that direction. You know, put us on the same plane as China and North Korea and so forth. I think we have an opportunity to consider this born alive legislation, because what that does is it says that if a baby is born alive, you protect it. Why is that important? It starts to show how radical the other side is. This is ground we fight on, we win, we have overwhelming public support for that. And let's put those who are pro-abortion on record of voting against a born alive bill. It says if a baby is born alive, that baby is protected versus could be killed by the physician.
What you're saying is language here is important. I want to turn to your role on the Appropriations Committee. How are you going to be able to protect pro-life protections like the Hyde Amendment, which bans taxpayer funds from going to most abortions, when House Democrats just want to see it scrapped?
They do. I think this is one of the great threats that we face under a Nancy Pelosi and far-left agenda coming out of the House. This is a very pro-abortion caucus they have right now in the United States House of Representatives, and we must do all we can to stop and ensure that none of our hard-fought pro-life protections are removed because of Nancy Pelosi and her peers. So here's what I'm encouraged by. I led a letter to President Trump signed by 48 of my colleagues. So 49 U.S. senators, including Mitch McConnell and myself, were on the cover letter to President Trump. We said, Mr. President, we want to make sure you would stop any legislation that might come that would strip any of our protections, the Hyde protections, Mexico City and so forth. And the good news, as we heard at the pro-life rally, the pro-life march, the president says he supports that letter. He will stop anything coming out of the House that would strip those protections. I am so grateful that President Trump is taking a firm stand on behalf of those who don't have a voice.
Thank you so much, Senator Steve Daines, Republican from Montana. I hope you'll come back to the program.
Glad to.
Mike Braun, a Republican from Indiana and the only Catholic freshman in the Senate, speaks out about his pro-life views.
I think it should be one of the simplest things that we all agree to, and it was mostly my roots. You know, from an early age, I was taught that God-given gift, respect life.
You can see more of Catherine Hadrow's interview tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern on EWTN. Up next, Pope Francis on St. John Bosco. And we talk with the head of a faith-based foster agency given a waiver by the Trump administration.
Con gli occhi di uomo e con gli occhi di Dio, la gioia.
Pope Francis says priests should be joyful like St. John Bosco, whose feast day is today. He says the key is to see the world with human eyes and the eyes of God. There is concern of discrimination in South Carolina since the Trump administration granted a religious freedom waiver. It allows a South Carolina Protestant foster care agency to work only with couples who adhere to their beliefs. South Carolina Governor Henry McMaster, who requested the waiver from the Department of Health and Human Services on behalf of Miracle Hill Ministries, issued a statement saying, by granting this waiver, President Trump and Secretary Azar have shown the entire world that as Americans, our fundamental right to practice religion, regardless of our faith, will not be in jeopardy under this administration. Joining me now from Spartanburg, South Carolina, is Reed Lehman, President and CEO of Miracle Hill Ministries. Reed, welcome to our broadcast.
Thanks, it's good to be with you.
You accept children of all faiths, but you require your foster parents to share the Protestant faith. Why was it so important to you to obtain this waiver?
Well, I think it needs to be clarified up front. We're here about our right to exist. That's the only issue for us. Do we have the right to serve? And it was really important for us to receive this waiver because we were told that unless we dropped our requirement that our foster families be Christian, that we would be closed.
So the lead lawyer for the group Children's Rights has called the decision granting this waiver state-sanctioned and government-funded discrimination. What do you say to that? Is it?
I say that's a very creative way of misleading the public about what's going on. No, it's not discrimination. It wasn't discrimination for the Catholics in Philadelphia or in Illinois, and it's not discrimination with Miracle Hill in South Carolina. We are a joyous community of followers of Christ who band together to serve the most needy in our state. And we are not excluding anybody. We're banding together as a joyful Christian community. And we gladly refer anyone else who wants to be a foster parent to the more than 7 or 8 other agencies serving the upstate that can provide those services with them.
Why do you think that faith-based foster care providers, like the one you mentioned in Pennsylvania and Philadelphia, which is Catholic, why do you think that those across the country are facing such scrutiny?
I think our society is becoming more hostile to religious beliefs. And I think that there's an expectation that religious organizations like ours and like yours who serve in the public square will give up our religious beliefs in order to serve. And as you know, neither for the Catholics in Philadelphia nor for the folks here at Miracle Hill, that's the heart of who we are. We're centered on loving and serving Jesus Christ, and we're not willing to give that up in order to continue to serve.
Reed Lehman, President and CEO of Miracle Hill Ministries, thank you for joining us. And finally tonight, my commentary on the outrageous words of Virginia Democratic Governor Ralph Northam on a proposed law to allow abortion up until moments before birth, and on the law passed by New York Governor Cuomo allowing abortion by non-doctors up until the point of birth for any number of reasons. I understand there are differing opinions on abortion, but whatever your views, can't we all agree that for the state to sanction killing a baby that is about to be born is nothing short of murder? Some of those who are not pro-life, who support being able to terminate a baby at 24 weeks, as was the law in New York until last week, are surely appalled at this radical shift. Once the firestorm erupted, even the Virginia delegate who sponsored the bill said she couldn't support the way it was written. As a Catholic, I find abortion abhorrent at any time, but even those who disagree should be able to see the stark reality that aborting a full-term baby minutes before it emerges from the mother's womb is barbaric. These efforts in Virginia and New York are indefensible and shouldn't even be part of our public discourse. I'd like to hear your reaction. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, to all of you around the world, thank you for watching. I'm Lauren Ashburn. Let's keep in touch online. Your thoughts on my commentary are much appreciated. Follow me at Lauren Ashburn on Twitter and Lauren Ashburn EWTN on Facebook. Good night, and God bless you.